The street was quiet that morning, filled only with the sound of birdsong and the slow shuffle of an elderly man making his way home from the grocery store. He was the kind of man everyone in the neighborhood respected, kind-hearted, soft-spoken, and always ready with a smile. Yet little did he know this peaceful walk would turn into a nightmare, a twisted story of betrayal and injustice that would shake the community to its core. And tonight, you and I are going to uncover every detail of how a single racist cop thought he could destroy an innocent life, only to regret it when the truth finally came out in court. Welcome to Talecraft, where we bring you powerful stories that not only captivate your heart but also make you think about the world we live in. If this is your first time here, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and of course subscribe so you don't miss future stories like this one. And here's a question to start things off. Do you believe justice always comes to light even when it feels impossible? Hold on to that thought because by the end of this story you might have an answer. This is not just another story about police misconduct. This is about a man who had lived his entire life with dignity, stripped of that dignity in the blink of an eye, simply because of the color of his skin. A racist cop, fueled by prejudice and arrogance, believed he could use his badge as a weapon. With a sly hand and a calculated move, he planted drugs on an elderly black man who had never committed a crime in his life. The cop thought it would be an easy win, a quick arrest to pad his record, and perhaps even a way to send a cruel message. But what he didn't know was that his actions would unravel in the most humiliating way possible. The story matters because it shines a light on a dark reality, how power can be abused and how vulnerable communities often bear the brunt of that abuse. It matters because when justice is twisted, it doesn't just hurt one person. It sends shockwaves across families, across neighborhoods, across entire cities. And yet, there's a deeper truth hidden in this story, that lies and corruption can never stand forever, that eventually the truth claws its way to the surface. This isn't just about the downfall of one crooked officer. It's about resilience, courage, and the unshakable will to fight back. Over the next few minutes, we'll walk through the details together. We'll see how a single encounter on a sunny afternoon spiraled into a criminal charge that could have destroyed a man's life. We'll follow the twists of the investigation, the heartbreak of the family, and the shocking evidence that turned the tables. And finally, we'll step inside the courtroom itself, where every lie came crashing down in front of a stunned audience. By the end, you'll see why this cop's smug confidence turned into regret, and how justice was delivered in the most dramatic way. So stay with me because this story is not just about injustice, it's about hope. It's about the fight for truth in a world where lies often seem louder. And as we move forward, remember this. One man's arrogance nearly destroyed a life, but it also ignited a chain of events that would remind everyone watching that power without accountability always crumbles. Let's begin. It was a sunny afternoon in a small, tight-knit neighborhood where everyone knew each other by name. On that day, Mr. Harold Johnson, a 72-year-old retired schoolteacher, was returning from the corner store with a bag of bread, milk, and fruit. Harold was a man of quiet dignity, known for tutoring kids on his porch and sharing stories from his years of teaching. He had lived through difficult times, segregation, hardship, and the long fight for equality, but he had always believed that honesty and patience could guide him through anything. Little did Harold know, a storm was waiting for him at the end of that street. Patrolling nearby was Officer Daniels, a man with a reputation that the community whispered about but could never prove. He was known for pulling over black drivers more than anyone else, for writing up charges that never seemed to stick, and for treating people with a sneer that told them they were nothing in his eyes. Daniels craved control. He craved the feeling of superiority his badge gave him. And on that day when he saw Harold walking slowly home, Daniels decided it was the perfect opportunity to make an example out of someone who couldn't fight back. Harold was adjusting his grocery bag when he heard the screech of tires behind him. Daniels stepped out of his cruiser with an authority that made people freeze. "What's in the bag, old man?" he barked, his hand already resting on his holster. Harold, startled but polite, explained that it was just groceries. He even offered to show him the receipt from the store. But Daniels wasn't looking for explanations, he was looking for a target. He shoved Harold against the hood of the cruiser, searching his pockets while the bag of food spilled onto the pavement. Bananas rolled across the street. Milk splashed onto the curb. Neighbors peeked through their curtains but didn't dare step outside. And then it happened. Daniels slipped a small bag of white powder into Harold's coat pocket. It was so quick, so practiced that Harold himself didn't even notice. Moments later, Daniels pulled it out with a triumphant smirk. "Well, well," he sneered, holding the bag high in the air, "looks like we've got ourselves a drug dealer." Harold's face drained of color. His voice trembled as he tried to protest, insisting he had never touched drugs in his life. But Daniels wasn't listening. He already had the story written in his head, and Harold was the villain in it. Handcuffs clinked around Harold's wrists as Daniels recited the charges in a mocking tone. To the world outside it looked like another police bust. To Harold it was the end of everything he had worked for, the years of teaching, the respect of his neighbors, the pride he held for raising his family. He thought of his late wife, who had always believed that the justice system, though imperfect, would never fail someone truly innocent. His chest ached with fear as Daniels shoved him into the back seat of the cruiser. The once gentle man who had taught children how to read now sat accused of being a criminal, and the world was none the wiser. But there were witnesses. A young boy on a bicycle had seen something odd when Daniels reached into Harold's pocket. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Green, swore she saw the officer slip something in before he discovered it. Whispers began to ripple through the community, people quietly wondering if this was yet another case of power being abused. Yet fear kept them silent for now. Daniels strutted around with the smugness of someone who believed he was untouchable, completely unaware that his carefully staged performance had already begun to unravel. As Harold sat in the holding cell later that evening, his hands shaking, he replayed the moment in his head again and again. He knew the truth. He knew he was innocent. But the world outside only saw what Daniels wanted them to see. And as the weight of false charges pressed down on him, Harold prayed that somehow, some way the truth would break free. Because deep down, he believed that lies could never bury the truth forever. Harold's family was shocked when they heard the news. His son, Marcus, immediately dropped everything, rushing to the police station with a mix of fear and determination. The notion that a man who had dedicated his life to teaching and helping others could suddenly be labeled a criminal was unthinkable. Friends and neighbors began whispering, questioning how such an injustice could occur. Yet even in that fear there was a spark, a belief that the truth, though buried beneath lies and deception, could still surface if the right people looked closely enough. Marcus had always admired his father's integrity, and he refused to let it be tarnished. He immediately contacted a seasoned attorney known for exposing police misconduct. Together, they began reviewing the incident step by step, replaying security camera footage from nearby stores and sidewalks. The team meticulously documented every detail: the officer's body language, the sudden appearance of the drugs, and the impossibility of Harold committing the crime he was accused of. Each frame revealed inconsistencies that slowly started to crack Daniels' carefully constructed narrative. Meanwhile, word of the arrest spread through the community, sparking outrage and concern. Local residents began coming forward, recounting small but telling details. Some recalled seeing Daniels acting suspiciously near Harold before the so-called discovery of drugs. Others remembered his arrogance during previous interactions. While many were initially hesitant, fear of retaliation waned as the investigation gathered momentum. The more people spoke, the more undeniable the pattern became. Daniels had abused his power, targeting Harold not for justice, but for his own agenda. The prosecutor assigned to the case was equally meticulous. She pored over the evidence, noting every discrepancy between Daniels' report and the physical proof. When body cam footage was recovered, it showed a critical moment, an image that made Harold's claims undeniable. The officer's hand can clearly be seen moving toward Harold's coat before suddenly producing the bag of drugs. The visual evidence contradicted every word he had written in his official report, exposing not just a lie, but a deliberate attempt to frame an innocent man. As Marcus reviewed the footage, his resolve hardened. He wasn't just fighting for his father. He was confronting a larger issue: systemic abuse of authority. He reached out to civil rights advocates and journalists, ensuring the story would not remain hidden. Each conversation fueled a strategy to bring the truth to light while keeping the investigation grounded in facts, not emotion. Marcus understood that, in the courtroom, credibility and preparation mattered more than anger or outrage. Even Daniel's colleagues began to sense the tide turning. Rumors spread of internal reviews and mounting scrutiny from supervisors. The officer, once confident, now grew nervous, a subtle but unmistakable tension replacing his earlier arrogance. He realized, perhaps too late, that planting evidence on Harold was no longer a simple misstep. It was a trap with consequences he could not control. Every lie he had counted on was now under relentless examination, and the walls were closing in fast. By the time the trial approached, the groundwork for justice was set. Evidence, witness testimony, and community support had created a narrative that could not be ignored. Harold, though still shaken, regained confidence knowing that the truth was finally in capable hands. Marcus stood by his father's side, determined and unwavering, ready to ensure that the corrupt actions of a single officer would be exposed. What had begun as a quiet, frightening night had transformed into a relentless pursuit of truth that no one, especially Daniels, could evade. The day of the trial arrived, and the courthouse buzzed with tension. Reporters jostled for position, cameras focused on every angle, and members of the community filled the gallery with quiet anticipation. Harold and Marcus entered together, side by side, a picture of strength despite the weight of the injustice they had endured. Across the room, Officer Daniels sat rigid in his uniform, his confident posture replaced by subtle unease. He had believed that once the charges were filed, his story would carry him through. But today, the truth he tried to bury would stand before everyone in full, undeniable clarity. The trial began with the prosecution presenting its case, carefully detailing the events leading to Harold's arrest. Witnesses stepped forward, each providing their testimony with calm precision. Store clerks described what they had seen on the day in question, and neighbors recounted odd behavior from Daniels that contradicted his official report. Then the critical piece of evidence was introduced, the body cam footage. Every eye in the courtroom fixed on the screen as it showed, frame by frame, the moment Daniels planted the drugs. The murmurs began quietly, then grew into stunned disbelief. The courtroom held its breath. Daniels attempted to speak in his defense, claiming stress and split-second judgment. His voice, once authoritative and smug, now trembled under scrutiny. The attorney representing Harold methodically dismantled each excuse, pointing to inconsistencies in Daniels' report and highlighting the impossible timeline of events. The jury listened, rapt, as the evidence piled up, proving that the arrest had been orchestrated, not accidental. The room seemed to shrink with tension. Even observers who had initially supported the police officer were now leaning forward, eyes wide, unable to deny the reality unfolding before them. Marcus watched quietly as the courtroom drama reached its peak. His father sat composed but visibly moved, gripping his chair as the truth became undeniable. For months he had worried that the system might fail them. But seeing the footage, hearing the testimony, and witnessing the careful legal presentation brought a deep sense of vindication. Justice, it seemed, was finally catching up to the man who had tried to ruin Harold's life. Marcus felt the rush of relief mingled with lingering anger at what had been done. The turning point came when the judge addressed Daniels directly. Her voice was calm but authoritative, resonating with the weight of the law. She recounted the evidence, the testimonies, and the irrefutable body cam footage. Daniels' face paled, beads of sweat formed on his forehead. For the first time, he realized that his arrogance, his prejudice, and his deceit had led him to this very moment. The smugness that had carried him through past encounters dissolved entirely. Instant regret replaced his earlier confidence, a recognition that the truth could not be silenced. Finally, the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted with emotion, cheers, sighs, and tears intertwined as the community witnessed justice served. Daniels slumped in his chair, realizing the magnitude of his downfall. It was a moment he could never erase, a humiliation he had brought upon himself. For Harold and Marcus, the weight of relief was almost tangible. The years of fear, anxiety, and doubt were replaced with a sense of closure and triumph over corruption. As the gavel fell, Harold rose, supported by his son, and the courtroom seemed to exhale collectively. Outside, crowds celebrated quietly, sharing the moment with a mix of joy and solemn reflection. The story that had begun with injustice had reached a powerful conclusion, sending a message far beyond the walls of that courthouse. The corrupt actions of a single officer were no match for truth, evidence, and determination. Justice had prevailed, and the moment of reckoning left an unforgettable mark on everyone present. The courtroom emptied, but the impact of Harold's story lingered far beyond its walls. For weeks, neighbors and community members discussed the trial, reflecting on how one man's bravery and one family's determination had exposed corruption. Harold's name became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of abuse and prejudice, truth could triumph. Marcus often thought about how close they had come to losing everything, and how justice, though delayed, had finally arrived. The relief they felt was profound, yet tempered by the knowledge of what could have happened. For the community, the case was more than a single victory, it was a wake-up call. People began asking difficult questions about accountability, oversight, and the responsibilities of those entrusted to protect society. Conversations that were once whispered in fear became public discussions, with neighbors encouraging one another to stand up when injustice occurred. Harold's experience demonstrated that even the most powerful individuals could not escape scrutiny when evidence and determination converged. It reminded everyone that courage and truth were stronger than lies and intimidation. Marcus reflected on his role throughout the ordeal. He had acted not only as a son but as a protector of his father's dignity and a voice for justice. He realized that their fight wasn't only personal, it carried a message for future generations. Power without accountability can be devastating, but when the innocent are willing to speak, when the truth is presented clearly, injustice loses its grip. Harold's case showed that even those who attempt to manipulate the system are ultimately held accountable, and that hope persists when people refuse to remain silent. And this is where you, our audience, come in. Stories like Harold's teach us the importance of vigilance and courage. They remind us to question authority when necessary and to stand against wrongdoing wherever we see it. If this story moved you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Talecraft, and don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement ensures these stories are not forgotten and that the lessons they carry continue to inspire change. Justice prevailed, but the responsibility to uphold truth remains in all of us.